Hello, everyone. Welcome to the last session before dinner. Thank you for being here. I'm going to talk to you about Devspace versus Skaffold and the way I experienced those when working with Java. It's going to be an alert session. Hopefully, all the demos are going to work smoothly. I'm Anna, currently working as a developer advocate for Oracle. Thank you, Anna. Currently working as a developer advocate for Oracle, and I've been passionate about working with Java and Kubernetes for a long time. However, probably like many of you have been searching a way to have Kubernetes development simplified for me as a developer. And I've tried various tools across time. So I've also tried Devspace and Skaffold as well. And just for your information, I recently found out there are more than 30 tools that can help you deal with Kubernetes development nowadays. So it's quite a lot for us to choose from. But let's see how those two are doing for us as Java developers. So first of all, let's talk about Devspace. Can you please raise your hand if you have used Devspace? So one person? Good. Thank you. So Devspace, it's an open source developer tool for Kubernetes that lets you develop and deploy cloud-native software faster, but don't they all? Also known as kubectl on steroids. I like that one better. So we're going to dive a little bit into the demo for this one, quite easy. But if you want to start with Devspace, the first thing that you should consider is that you should already have a build engine to containerize your application. So it expects you to have either Docker, BuildKit, Canico, or a way to customly build your container images. And of course, one of the three, kubectl manifests, Helm charts, or customizations. So you need these in order to initialize your project with Devspace. Now for my project, my example project TaskBuddy, which is a glorified to-do application, working with JDK 21, Spring Boot, and Vue. I generated my manifests with Decorate, using the Maven plugin for that. And I maintain my container image via Docker file. So probably many of you have started like this, or either made a Docker file and wrote your own manifests and YAML. However, I didn't want to write any YAML in this case, except for maybe the Devspace configuration. And I put Decorate to work with that command over there for me. So without further delay, let's go into action. First of all, the project TaskBuddy running on JDK 21, having a very nice Docker file with two stages. One is build. And in the build part, I'm just making my own GRE that I'm going to use for running my application, but also I'm building my application using Maven. So I'm installing Maven and running Maven over that. The way that I'm building my application, I'm externalizing that to a script called setup.ch, which does, the Maven package, and that's it. Now, if I'm looking to the to the setup.ch, I really wanted to do another way to start my application. So I want to start my application with Spring Boot run instead of the Java -jar for this situation, because I'm in the build phase. So I can define an entry point for that one. Maybe I can later use it, and you'll see how. So coming back to my Docker file, the build phase where I'm building my application, and then in the, let's say, production phase where I am working with my application, I'm just copying the GRE I previously built, the application, and running it with, Java -jar commands. Easy as that. So now I want to deploy it with this, and I want to continuously develop within it, like in a more developer-friendly way. So let's use Devspace for that. The way you use Devspace, of course, as I told you, it's going to use a Docker file and some Kubernetes manifests that were generated by Decorate here in the K8s folder. So let's run Devspace. So first of all, we need to initialize the project now that we know things. So I'm just going to run Devspace init. Devspace can detect my programming language. It detects as Java. But I need to select Maven. I'm building it with Maven in this case. Also, is asking me what and how I'm going to want to deploy this project. So I'm using kubectl because I'm using the Kubernetes manifests. I can also specify where those are. So kubernetes.yaml. Yes, I want to develop this project and my current working there with the source code. And based on the manifest that it sees in Kubernetes, it can tell me like, hey, you seem to be using this image. Would you like to use this one going further? Yes. And which port are you listening on? Usually, Spring Boot starts on 8080, so I'm going to start with this one too. And now I'm ready to use DevSpace, but let's see what's generated. So once you're doing this, it will generate for you two files. The first one is devspace.yaml, based on what you selected earlier. So get a name for your installation. You got two pipelines, meaning you are defining how your workflow is going to be when you're working with DevSpace. So in the dev mode, these steps will be followed here, like run the dependencies, find dependencies, pull secrets, if any, create the deployments, and start your app in dev mode. And then maybe you want to deploy. So in deployment, you want to build the images, you want to do the deployments, and see what's going on further. Now, the beauty of DevSpace is that it allows you to put more scripts, for example. So you can add your own functions, for example, for rollback. In this case, you can use this function in a pipeline, or define a more customized script and roll back through your deployment that was going well. Now, if we're going here, let's just make another pipeline. Just copy paste this one, and I'm going to call it rollback. And I'm just going to delete this part and call my function from above, it's just called rollback, in here. So whenever I'm going to run the pipeline, let me go here, with DevSpace run pipeline, pipeline, and here rollback, it's going to invoke those steps that I have defined here. So it's a pretty useful hack. But also you can have this in your other pipelines injected as well. Now let's look further. You have your images and the way you're building your images. And I like the fact that I'm building my image, I'm giving it a tag. It's from the Docker file, it's all good. This is the part with the deployments, all nice. Now let's go to the dev mode. The dev mode that was generated, it tells me the following story. So it's going to search for deployments that have run this image. And it's going to replace that image with this one that runs something Maven JDK 17, OpenJDK 17 Slim, which is not mine. So as a developer, I want to have control over what I'm deploying. And I'm going to prefer a different approach to this. I'm just going to remove this part. And I'm going to think a bit on how would I like to develop. I would like to always develop with my own Docker file. So never rely on something that's coming from external or maintain two separate Docker files in my development. So the way I can do it, I can customize this and the build part. So I can customize the tags and just give them a default value here. I can also customize the target, meaning which stage of my application I want to build. Maybe I want to build just the build phase, also contains an entry point that starts with MVN Spring Boot run. Or maybe I want to customize and just run directly for production mode, which is the Java -jar version. So in case one colleague is like thinking of using this by default without any other flag, I'm just going to put app target for my sake. Next, Docker file. But I need to instruct this in a way that would work both for production and both for development. And DevSpace is pretty cool because it has custom commands built in for that. So you can make your own commands on how you're building your image. And in my case, I just want to build my image for a specific platform, push that image, but I want to override at runtime with the image name containing also where I'm pushing in the registry, the tag, and of course the target, the selected layer in the Docker file. So for dev mode, now that we have this, I can run this command with -- target build. And for production, just go with target app and always change the tags as I want them and override them at runtime. Let's go back to the dev mode. Now that we have a way to build the image in the dev mode, let's see what's the sync about. So sync is about synchronizing the files you have on your local for your application with what's in the container. So what this does, it listens what you have on your local and your paths for your project, and is hot reloading what you have deployed over there. So I'm just gonna do this, change it to a different thing, because I don't want to sync everything in my project. I want to exclude the Git, I want to exclude the Docker file, I don't want to change them. I don't care about target. But when I upload, I want all the time to compile again the project, so I'm making sure that I'm running the latest code from my local. And last thing, let's look at terminal. So whenever I'm doing the dev mode, I get a helper script with some commands, which can, give me some boost in my development. But let's see what's in the devspace start.ch. So what this does, besides, printing beautifully devspace in the command line, is also running a command that I defined in my previous devspace YAML. But I don't want to run this. I want to run my own setup in here, which is running Maven. So I'm going to run this and start Spring Boot with mvn Spring Boot run. I don't need the path and the terminal prompt, but I need the shell here. So just keeping that. And now that we're going to devspace.yaml, I don't need the SSH to be enabled here. On which ports my application is going to forward. And of course, open the URL after this is done. Now the commands part, I don't need it anymore, as these commands I'm not using in my deployment. However, you can define your own commands, like which context to use, which build to be done, like do the devspace build much faster, just say devspace run build dev, and that's it. So you can make these commands and they work pretty fine, or within a team, like speeding up the velocity in your team as well. Okay, so now that we have this, I think we can start devspace dev. And yes, I am sure I want to run in default. Now it's going to take a while to sync the first time, because deploying my application is opening the port, so it's going to take a while. And while this is taking some time to sync with my application, there are a few ways that you can analyze what's going on with your devspace deployments. So you can run devspace analyze to check how your deployments went and what's the status of what you're running with devspace. Secondly, after devspace analyze, you can also use the devspace log. So you can see the run devspace logs pick to show the pod logs in that case. But what I like most about devspace is that it has a very nice UI. So let's just go here. So in the nice UI, you get, besides the logs and of course what's going on there streamed, get the context that you're on. Of course, the namespace that you're on right now, I'm on default. The stack you have ran in order to deploy and work with your application and what's over there. And the commands that I defined earlier in my devspace YAML, they can be inspected very nice here. And you can also run them from here very nicely too. So this is a pretty helpful view when it comes to your application. Now let's see if this synced. So now that's it synced. Let's start the app. So this is going to build my application and start everything within my container to be synced with the local. So whenever I'm going to change something on my local, it's going to be synced with what is in above in the container image. While that is getting deployed, because it sometimes takes a little while, let me get to the presentation of it. So there are a few components that I showed you earlier. There are the pipelines. You can customize what you are running with your logic within DevSpace. There are the images, so you can define multiple images that you're working with. Your project maybe has more images to do that. And you can define also how you're building, tagging, and pushing them. Deployments are always in the scope of the create deployments, and dev is, of course, in the scope of DevSpace dev. And the commands, you can make as many as you want to help you within your team. Now, within DevSpace, you can handle dependencies in two ways. So for example, if you have a dependency to another project or you need to deploy a database or something, you can handle that also with DevSpace by, of course, for that path or that Git repo to have a DevSpace YAML defined in it. Otherwise, it will not be seen. And the iterative development is most of the time, selecting a context in Kubernetes, build your image, start your local development, and make your code changes locally, and DevSpace will synchronize that for you. So let's see how that is going on for us. So yeah, it seems that the app has completed, but not in this browser. I have a few things cached. Okay, so just to show you this, how it works, I entered the to-do. And if I'm going to modify, let's say, the title on my local all the time, tasks to be done, this is going to restart again into replacing the file and compile the code for me in what I have in the pod. So let's just wait for a bit, and you can see that says scanning for projects and synchronizing with what I have in the pod. That's pretty useful functionality from my point of view in order to develop continuously with Kubernetes. And of course, tasks to be done. But you can see that I also preserved what I entered earlier, so it's pretty cool that you're not wasting the data maybe that you stored. Great. So iterative development works pretty swiftly. Now, if we are to think at a bigger level, how we're going to deploy, get dependencies, pull secrets, build your image, deploy, and of course rollback with custom functions. That's pretty cool. And rollbacks, you can handle them either with Helm, like doing Helm with rollbacks, or doing rollbacks with Kubernetes. It's not a built-in functionality, but it's something that you can manage with scripts and it's pretty cool to have it at hand. That's one way to look at it. And if you're like in the case of debugging, you have DevSpace Analyze. You can check the logs. You can look into the UI, but you can also attach to the container and have remote debugging. And last but not least, you can configure port forwarding or reverse port forwarding. Like if you're using telepresence to look into what's going on there, you need reverse port forwarding, and that's possible with reverse ports configuration. Now, second tool I want to talk to you about is Skaffold. How many of you use Skaffold? Okay, more users, 5 users. That's good. Skaffold is easy and repeatable Kubernetes development. And similar to the other tool, project initialization is similar. So you should already have, again, a build engine, but in this case, you have more to choose from. Again, Kubernetes, kubectl manifests, Helm charts, or customizations. And it's the same project, but I gave it a different name, called it TaskPal. I'm maintaining the container image, again, via the Docker file, so I want you to keep it similar and see how it behaves. Generating, again, the Kubernetes manifests with Decorate. And, of course, I installed the Skaffold CLI. Now, for Skaffold, things are going to be a little easier. Let me go to TaskPal. So, similar, Skaffold init. And it's going to give me a few options. Now, I said I want to keep it to my Docker file. And I'm going to use the POM XML, and it's going to just ask if I want that in a configuration. Of course I do. So scaffold.yaml is being created. And once this is done, I'm just waiting for it, I can see it's a little shorter than the other one. Now the build artifacts controls how am I going to build my image. And the manifest, obviously, how I'm going to deploy. So I'm thinking again, maybe I can customize this for a way to work on the development and a way to work on production. And how can I do that? Luckily, Skaffold also has custom way of working. So in case of Skaffold, I can define also my build command. But in this case, I'm relying on Decorate to do the path. So I'm going to format in a bit, by the way, so for those of you who are worried. I'm just going to say that I wanted to look all the time for the dependencies on source main. Just let me format the YAML part. And I want to sync, because also Skaffold has a way to reload the app by inferring the paths in my Docker file. What this means is that it's going to detect what I'm using to build in my Docker files, what I'm changing in my Docker file. And usually I want to look into changes for source main and only that. And that will be automatically synced with my dev mode. But I don't want this to be started all the time. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create profiles for this. So I'm going to say, let's say for stage, I want to build normally with Docker file. And for development, I want to use the other way of building, the one that is using the custom command with MVN. Of course, I need to remove this because they cannot work together. And let me go see it. YAML all the time. Just get it. Okay, so if I formatted correctly the YAML, everything should be okay. Hopefully. So let's see. Now I'm using Rancher Desktop, and there is a situation with it. Sometimes my Skaffold installation doesn't find the Docker host. So in this situation, I have to provide this to the runners. So Docker host and Skaffold. Sorry.
You have the same profile name twice.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. That would be Skaffold dev again. And I'm going to say for this one, I want you to use the localhost 5000 local repository because I'm working on local, and use the profile dev and all the time port forward what's going on to local. Come on, unknown command. It's good. Because I forgot this. And just copy paste it. So now my dev mode is starting to, this is going to do a hot reload as well with what I have on my local. So it's starting to deploy the app, deployments will stabilize, and again I have synchronization with my local. Now, let's compare a few things. So the starter configuration with Skaffold, I liked it. It depends on the container build engine that you're using, and of course how your artifacts are being built. But I liked it a lot because I can overwrite how I'm going to build my image via profiles. Dependency management, again, it's something that I can handle via Git or via the paths. Again, I need to define all those scaffold.yaml, otherwise they will not be seen. And from iterative development with Skaffold, I can build locally and define the way that I'm building locally via custom build commands and keep that in sync with a single Docker file, start my local development, and make code changes within Skaffold and synchronize that automatically with my deployment. Now, debugging, on the other hand, I like that I have diagnosed to see what's going on with my Skaffold deployments, but besides logs, I like that it has the debug command built in. What the debug does, it attaches the debugger so you can perform remote debugging yourself. Or you can do in port forwarding, as in the case of the other tool as well. Now, this is pretty cool. You can deploy all these from my repo. I have a few final thoughts on them. So I like DevSpace for its custom functions and the fact that I can provide my own scripts for rollback. I searched for a way to do rollbacks with Skaffold that is similar or simpler than that. So I felt that DevSpace was better when it comes to rollbacking. However, Skaffold has a bigger community and has built-in debug and test artifacts functions, which I pretty much liked. And I like that Skaffold has the profiles that can override the way I built my application. On the other hand, DevSpace has profiles, but it can only activate, patch, or merge what is going on in a deployment, but it cannot overwrite what's going on there in a similar way that Skaffold is handling. And last but not least, I love the custom commands because I am writing less, and it's easier to manage and write what I'm having there with it. And that's it. This is where you can find the code and with all the configurations in it, so for you to try it. And if you have any questions, I am welcoming them. Thank you.